Kalen Vance regained consciousness with a painful jolt, the taste of copper flooding his mouth. His vision swam as he tried to focus on the blinking emergency lights of his ship's cockpit. The Nomad, a reliable transport vessel that had served him for 7 years, now lay in ruins around him. Warning sirens blared, their sound muffled as if coming from underwater. "Status report," he croaked, his training kicking in despite his disorientation. The ship's AI responded with a distorted voice. "Multiple critical systems failure. Hull integrity compromised. Life support operating at 17% capacity. Emergency power reserves at 32%. Pain shot through Kalen's side as he unbuckled himself from the pilot's seat. Probably a cracked rib, maybe worse. He had been making a routine cargo run through the Epsilon sector when something had knocked the Nomad off course. An unexpected debris field or possibly a sensor malfunction. Whatever it was, it had sent him spiraling onto this desolate moon. The navigation system flickered to life just long enough for him to confirm his location. He had crashed on Nix 9, an uninhabited moon known for its harsh conditions, violent magnetic storms, and temperatures that plummeted to lethal levels during its long nights. Not exactly a vacation spot. "Heating system status?" he asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. "Primary heating non-functional. Emergency thermal reserves estimated to last 4 standard hours at current temperature." Kalen checked his chronometer. Nightfall would arrive in approximately 3 hours, and with it, temperatures well below what a human could survive without proper equipment. His EVA suit had been damaged in the crash, a tear running down the left sleeve rendering its thermal properties useless. "Perfect," he muttered, pushing himself to his feet and stumbling toward the emergency supplies. He would need to salvage what he could and find better shelter before. A noise from the cargo bay stopped him in his tracks. The sound of metal scraping against metal, too deliberate to be settling debris. He wasn't alone. Instinctively, Kalen reached for the pulse pistol at his hip. Years as a mercenary before becoming a transport pilot had taught him to be prepared for anything. He moved silently toward the cargo bay, weapon raised. What he found was not what he expected. A slender figure moved among the scattered cargo containers, examining the wreckage with methodical precision. Even in the dim emergency lighting, her lavender skin seemed to glow with an ethereal quality. When she turned toward him, Kalen found himself staring into luminous silver eyes that reflected the blinking lights like mirrors. A Xylosian. He had transported their diplomats before, but had never interacted closely with one of their scientists. "You're awake," she said, her voice melodic with the characteristic harmonic undertones of her species. "I was beginning to worry about the extent of your cranial trauma." Kalen kept his weapon raised. "Who are you, and what are you doing on my ship?" "My name is Lyra. I am a xenobiologist from the Xylosian Science Academy." She gestured to the crash site visible through the shattered cargo bay doors. "My research vessel was shot down approximately 3 kilometers from here. I was investigating the source of unusual energy readings when I detected your crash and came to offer assistance." "Shot down." Kalen lowered his weapon slightly. "By whom?" "Omnicorp mercenaries," she replied, a flicker of something, fear, crossing her features. "They want my research." Before Kalen could respond, the ship groaned ominously around them, the metal hull contracting as the temperature began to drop. "Night is approaching faster than predicted," Lyra observed. "This vessel will not provide adequate shelter once full darkness falls." Kalen glanced at his damaged EVA suit. "Got any better ideas?" "I have emergency supplies for my vessel," she said, "including a thermal shelter. But first, let me see to your injuries." Despite his suspicion, Kalen allowed Lyra to examine his wounds. Her touch was clinical but gentle as she applied a translucent gel to the gash on his forehead and the bruising along his ribs. The pain subsided almost immediately. "Accelerated cellular regeneration compound," she explained. "It will stabilize your injuries for now, though you will need proper medical attention eventually." As the temperature continued to drop at an alarming rate, they gathered what supplies they could salvage from the Nomad. Kalen secured emergency rations, communication equipment, and his survival kit. Lyra collected samples from her research in a sleek metallic case that she handled with particular care. By the time they stepped outside the ship, the temperature had already fallen below freezing. The landscape was stark and barren, a wasteland of dark stone and crystalline formations that caught what little light remained from the distant sun. The horizon was dominated by jagged mountains, their peaks disappearing into swirling clouds that pulsed with electrical energy. Magnetic storm forming, Lyra noted, consulting a device on her wrist. We need to find shelter immediately. Kalen's body had already begun to shake violently, the cold seeping through his damaged suit. His extremities were growing numb, and his breath formed thick clouds in front of his face. They had been outside for less than 10 minutes, and already the situation was becoming dire. There, Lyra pointed to a rock formation about half a kilometer away that should provide temporary protection from the elements. The journey to the rocks was excruciating. Each step became more difficult as the cold sapped Kalen's strength. By the time they reached the relative shelter of the overhang, his lips had turned blue, and he could no longer feel his fingers or toes. Your core temperature is dropping dangerously, Lyra said, her concerned eyes scanning his vital signs with some unseen technology. Human physiology is not designed for these conditions. Tell me something I don't know. Kalen stammered through chattering teeth. Lyra hesitated, then opened the metallic case she had been carrying. From it, she removed what looked like a tightly folded piece of fabric, iridescent and impossibly thin. This is a stasis cocoon, she explained. Advanced thermal technology from my world. It generates and maintains heat using minimal energy. She paused, a faint purple tinge appearing on her cheeks. Was that a blush? However, it functions most efficiently with 2 biological heat sources. It was designed for emergency survival situations. Kalen's addled brain took a moment to process what she was suggesting. You want us to? Share that thing. It is the most logical solution to our current predicament, Lyra replied, though her eyes shifted away briefly. The cultural implications of physical proximity notwithstanding, it represents our best chance of survival until morning. The cold was becoming unbearable, making decision-making increasingly difficult. Kalen knew he had perhaps minutes before hypothermia rendered him unconscious. Fine, he managed to say. Let's do it. Lyra unfolded the cocoon, which expanded to reveal a sealed sleeping bag-like structure, shimmering with an internal glow. She helped Kalen remove his useless EVA suit, leaving him in his thermal undergarments, then efficiently removed her outer layers as well, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit that seemed to pulse gently with her heartbeat. You must enter first, she instructed. I will seal us in afterward. Awkwardly, Kalen crawled into the cocoon. It was surprisingly spacious inside, though that wouldn't matter much in a moment. Lyra slipped in beside him with a grace that seemed impossible in such confines, then sealed the opening with a touch to an invisible control panel. Immediately, warmth began to spread throughout the cocoon. The material conformed to their bodies, creating a snug but not uncomfortable enclosure. Kalen couldn't help but notice the alien warmth of Lyra beside him, slightly higher than human temperature. With a subtle vibration he could feel through his skin. The thermal exchange will stabilize in approximately 7 minutes, Lyra said, her voice sounding oddly intimate in the enclosed space. Try to remain still to maximize efficiency. Kalen nodded, acutely aware of their forced proximity. He had never been this close to a Xylosian before. Few humans had. Their species had only established formal relations with humanity 20 years earlier, and while diplomatic and trade connections existed, social interaction remained limited and formal. Yet here he was, sharing what was essentially a high-tech sleeping bag with one, their lives depending on each other's body heat on a frozen moon in the middle of nowhere. What way to break the ice, he thought with grim humor as warmth finally began to return to his extremities. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, the only sound their breathing gradually synchronizing in the small space. As his mind cleared with returning warmth, Kalen began to process the strangeness of his situation and the many questions it raised. So, he finally broke the silence. Want to tell me why Omnicorp is shooting down Xylosian science vessels? Lyra was quiet for a moment before responding. I discovered something on this moon that could change the energy landscape of the entire galactic sector. Something Omnicorp wants to control exclusively. What kind of something? The crystalline formations on this moon, she said. They emit a unique form of energy unlike anything previously documented. My preliminary research suggests they could provide nearly limitless clean power with minimal extraction impact. She shifted slightly, her silver eyes glinting in the soft glow of the cocoon. But Omnicorp doesn't want to develop the resource responsibly. They want to weaponize it. And they shot down your ship to get your research. Yes, I barely escaped with my life and essential data. She studied his face. And you? What brings a human cargo pilot to this remote region? Kalen hesitated. His current job was legitimate, but his past was complicated. Transport run, medical supplies to the mining colonies in the Gamma Quadrant. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. A former mercenary turned transport pilot, Lyra observed casually. Interesting career transition. Kalen stiffened. How did you? Your muscle memory when you drew your weapon. The way you assess the terrain for tactical advantages. The scar pattern on your shoulder is consistent with pulse rifle backfire. She smiled slightly at his surprised expression. Xylosians are observant by nature. I left that life behind, he said firmly. We all have pasts we must reconcile with, she replied, without judgment. I am merely grateful your skills may prove useful in our current situation. As they talked, Kalen began to experience something strange, fleeting impressions that didn't seem to originate from his own mind. A flash of complicated equations, the sensation of excitement at a scientific discovery, a brief but intense feeling of homesickness for a place he'd never seen with multiple moons hanging in a lavender sky. Are you doing something? He asked, confused. Lyra's eyes widened. You're experiencing my thoughts? I don't know. Maybe? Just fragments. Is that a Xylosian thing you forgot to mention? No, she whispered, fascination overtaking her surprise. It's something else entirely. Something I believed was merely legend. She shifted to face him more directly in the confined space. There are ancient stories among my people of a rare biopsychic resonance that can occur between certain species under conditions of stress and proximity. A temporary melding of consciousness. It was thought to be just myth. Well, it's happening, Kalen said, uncomfortable with the idea of someone else in his head. Can you make it stop? I don't think it's dangerous, Lyra said. In fact, it could be beneficial. The resonance is limited and involuntary. Surface thoughts and strong emotions only. It might help us coordinate better in this hostile environment. Before Kalen could respond, a deafening roar shook their shelter. The magnetic storm had arrived in full force, battering the rock formation with incredible power. Through a gap in the rocks, Kalen could see the sky had turned a violent purple, streaked with bolts of energy that struck the ground with devastating force. But the storm brought something else, movement in the darkness. Shadowy forms darted between rock formations, drawn to the electromagnetic chaos. Predators. We need to move, Kalen said urgently. This location is too exposed. Lyra checked her wrist device. There's a network of caves approximately 1 kilometer south. They should provide better protection from both the storm and any indigenous life forms. In this, Kalen gestured to the maelstrom outside. The storm will provide cover from Omnicorp scanners, she countered. And the stasis cocoon can be modified for limited mobility while maintaining thermal protection. With reluctance, they emerged from the cocoon, which Lyra quickly reconfigured into a tent-like structure that covered them both while allowing restricted movement. It wasn't comfortable, but it would keep them from freezing to death during their journey. Moving through the storm was like walking through a nightmare. The magnetic disturbances played havoc with their electronic equipment, and the wind threatened to tear the cocoon from their grasp. Twice they had to take cover as lightning-like energy bolts struck nearby, shattering crystal formations and sending deadly shards flying in all directions. But the emerging resonance between them proved unexpectedly useful. Without speaking, Kalen sensed Lyra's warning of an approaching predator, a six-limbed creature with glossy black skin that seemed to absorb light. He pulled her behind a rock formation seconds before the creature leaped past their position. Later, Lyra reacted to Kalen's sudden intuition that the ground ahead was unstable, changing their path just before a sinkhole collapsed where they would have been walking. By the time they reached the cave entrance, the resonance had strengthened to the point where they could communicate basic ideas without words, a significant advantage in the howling storm. The cave network proved more extensive than expected, tunneling deep into the moon's surface. Speechless, crystal formations similar to those on the surface, but vastly larger and more complex, filled the cavern. Unlike their surface counterparts, these crystals pulsed with inner light, creating patterns that seemed almost deliberate. They ranged in color from deep purple to brilliant silver, and the energy they emitted was palpable even without instruments. "This is what OmniCorp is after," Lyra whispered, approaching one of the formations with reverence. "But this is beyond anything I theorized. The energy readings are exponentially higher than surface samples." Kalen felt a strange resonance from the crystals, different from, but somehow harmonious with the connection he was developing with Lyra. "They feel almost alive," Lyra finished his thought. "Yes, I'm detecting patterns within the energy fluctuations that suggest some form of communication or information exchange." She removed equipment from her pack and began taking readings, her excitement palpable both physically and through their growing mental connection. These crystals aren't just energy sources, they're nodes in a network, a system that spans the entire moon, perhaps. As Lyra worked, Kalen secured their temporary haven, setting up proximity alerts with the limited functioning technology they had left. The mental connection was becoming distracting, flashes of complex scientific concept from Lyra's mind mingling with his own thoughts. He tried to focus on practical concerns, but found himself increasingly drawn to her brilliant mind and the passion she felt for her work. When they finally settled down to rest, redeploying the stasis cocoon as a shelter, the close proximity intensified their mental connection. Dreams and memories began to bleed across the boundary between their minds. Kalen saw glimpses of Lyra's childhood on a world with gravity lower than Earth's, learning to navigate sprawling crystal cities with graceful bounds. He felt her dedication to science, her wonder at the universe's mysteries. And she saw his memories, too. His difficult upbringing in the overcrowded slums of Mars Colony, his desperate enlistment with mercenary companies to escape poverty, and eventually, the incident that had made him walk away from that life. They woke simultaneously, the mental connection momentarily overwhelming before settling into a more manageable background awareness. Neither mentioned the intimate glimpses they had shared, but something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding that transcended their biological differences. "We should move deeper into the cave system," Lyra suggested after consulting her instruments. "The energy readings grow stronger toward the center of the network. We might find answers there." Kalen nodded, but before they could prepare to depart, his proximity alert vibrated against his wrist. Someone was approaching the cave entrance. Through their strengthened connection, they coordinated without words. Kalen took a defensive position with his pulse pistol, while Lyra quickly packed their essential equipment. They retreated deeper into the tunnel system just as armored figures appeared at the mouth of the chamber they had occupied. "OmniCorp Elite Forces," Kalen whispered, recognizing the distinctive black and red armor through a gap in the crystals. "They're not just mercenaries, they're their best combat teams." Leading the squad was a tall figure whose armor bore additional insignia. Commander Volkov, one of OmniCorp's most ruthless operatives. Kalen's blood ran cold. He had never worked directly under Volkov during his mercenary days, but the commander's reputation for brutal efficiency was legendary. The Xylosian scientist came this way. Volkov's voice carried through the chamber. "And she's not alone. Scanners detected two distinct biometric signatures despite the interference. "The crystals are affecting our equipment, sir," one of the mercenaries reported. "We're getting energy readings that don't make sense." "I don't care about your equipment problems," Volkov snapped. "Find them. The scientist and her research are our priority. Kill her companion if necessary, but I want her alive." Kalen and Lyra retreated deeper into the tunnel system, using the resonance between them to move in perfect synchronization, avoiding loose rocks or anything that might give away their position. The tunnels grew narrower, forcing them to crawl in some sections, before opening into another large chamber even more spectacular than the first. This cavern was dominated by crystal formations that formed what appeared to be deliberate structures, arches, columns, and something resembling a dais at the center. The crystals here pulsed in complex patterns, creating a symphony of light that seemed to respond to their presence. "These aren't random formations," Lyra breathed, her scientific mind racing with possibilities that Kalen could partially perceive. "This is architecture, construction, with purpose." Before they could investigate further, the sound of pursuit grew closer. The Omnicorp team had picked up their trail. "We need to keep moving," Kalen urged. But Lyra hesitated, studying the chamber with intense focus. "No, this is important. This chamber is a nexus point in the network. If my theories are correct." She approached the central platform, where a cluster of crystals formed a rough circle. "This could be a control center of sorts." "We don't have time for scientific discovery," Kalen argued, checking his weapon charge. "Those aren't researchers behind us." "Trust me," Lyra said, looking into his eyes with an intensity that resonated through their connection. "This might be our only chance." Something in her certainty convinced him. Kalen took up a defensive position while Lyra examined the crystal formation. Through their connection, he could sense her methodical analysis, the testing of hypotheses, and then a surge of excitement. "It's responding to conscious direction," she explained rapidly. "The crystals are semi-sentient, or perhaps dormant parts of a larger consciousness. They're reacting to my thoughts and to our resonance." The pursuing mercenaries were getting closer. Kalen could hear them methodically checking tunnels, their discipline making them dangerously effective hunters. "Whatever you're going to do it fast," he warned. Lyra placed her hands on two of the larger crystals and closed her eyes. Through their connection, Kalen felt her reaching out, not just with her mind but with the resonance they shared. The crystals pulsed brighter in response, their light synchronizing with a rhythm that matched both their heartbeats. A shock wave of energy burst from the crystal formation, racing through the tunnels. The pursuing mercenaries cried out in surprise as their equipment malfunctioned, temporarily blinding and disorienting them. "That won't hold them long," Lyra said, her voice strained from the effort. "But I've discovered something far more important." Her silver eyes were wide with wonder. "These crystals are part of a vast communication network, the remnants of an ancient civilization that once inhabited this moon. The crystals are memory repositories, dormant but still functional. And Omnicorp wants to turn them into weapons," Kalen realized. "Yes, the energy these crystals produce could power devastating weapons systems, or provide clean energy to half the galaxy." She took his hands. "I think our resonance is key. The old texts speak of species that could communicate directly with these networks. Perhaps that's what's happening to us. The stress and proximity activated a dormant ability." Their moment of discovery was interrupted by Volkov's voice. "Closer now. Seal all tunnels leading from this section. They're trapped in here somewhere." "We need to find the central node," Lyra said urgently. "If we can reach the heart of the network, we might be able to fully activate it, and possibly call for help." "Which way?" Kalen asked, scanning the multiple tunnel entrances around the chamber. Lyra closed her eyes, seeming to listen to something beyond normal senses. "That one." She pointed to a narrow passage partially obscured by crystal growth. "The energy flow is strongest in that direction." As they made their way through the increasingly complex tunnel system, their mental connection continued to strengthen. Kalen found himself anticipating Lyra's movements, while she intuitively understood his tactical decisions without explanation. They encountered several Omnicorp search teams, but managed to evade or temporarily incapacitate them using a combination of Kalen's combat experience and Lyra's growing ability to influence the crystal network. Through flashes of shared memory, Lyra learned that Kalen had indeed once worked for Omnicorp, years ago, on operations he had tried to forget. "You never mentioned your Omnicorp connection," she said during a brief rest in a small chamber. "It wasn't my finest hour," he admitted. "I was young, desperate for credits, and didn't ask enough questions about who was signing my payment authorizations." "What made you leave?" Kalen's expression darkened. "A mining colony in the Procyon system. We were told it was a military target, insurgents using civilian cover. It wasn't. It was just miners who had discovered something Omnicorp wanted. Something like this, maybe." He looked at the crystals surrounding them. "I walked away after that. Been flying transport ever since, trying to do some good to balance the scales." Lyra was silent for a moment, absorbing his regret and sincerity through their connection. "The past shapes us, but it doesn't define us," she finally said. "What matters is who you choose to be now." Their journey deeper into the moon's crust became increasingly hazardous. Some tunnels had collapsed over time, while others were so narrow they had to squeeze through on their stomachs. The crystal formations grew more elaborate, and the energy more intense, sometimes interfering with their equipment and even causing physical discomfort as it resonated with their nervous systems. After what seemed like hours, they emerged into a vast underground cavern that took their breath away. The chamber was enormous, hundreds of meters across and nearly as high, with a domed ceiling composed entirely of interlocking crystal structures. At the center stood a massive column of pulsating crystal that reached from floor to ceiling, surrounded by concentric rings of smaller formations that created a mandala-like pattern across the floor. "The heart," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The central node of the entire network." As they cautiously approached the central column, the crystals responded to their presence, their light pulsing in harmony with Kalen and Lyra's synchronized heartbeats. Through their resonance, they both sensed a stirring, something ancient and vast gradually becoming aware of them. "It's waking up," Lyra said, her voice hushed. "After who knows how many millennia, it's responding to us, to our connection." Kalen felt it too, a presence that seemed to envelop his consciousness like an ocean surrounds a drop of water. Not threatening, but overwhelmingly vast and alien in its thinking. They had almost reached the central column when a pulse blast struck the crystal formation beside them, sending fragments flying. Kalen pulled Lyra down behind a crystal outcropping as more shots followed. Volkov stood at one of the chamber entrances, flanked by 6 heavily armed mercenaries. The commander held an advanced energy weapon in one hand and some kind of technical device in the other. "Impressive," he called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You've led us right to the prize. Thank you for your service, Dr. Lyra." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Lyra shouted back. "This isn't just an energy source, it's a sentient network, a living archive of an ancient civilization." Volkov laughed. "Even better. Imagine the military applications of a weaponized sentient energy system. Omnicorp isn't just after power generation, Doctor. We're after the ultimate weapon, one that thinks." He held up the device in his hand. This neural dampener was designed specifically for crystal-based consciousness. Our scientists have been studying smaller samples for years. Once we suppress its defenses, we can extract the core and adapt it to our purposes. Kalen assessed their situation with grim clarity. They were outnumbered and outgunned, with minimal cover. His pulse pistol was no match for the mercenaries' military-grade weapons. But through their connection, he sensed Lyra's determination and a plan forming in her mind. The resonance, she thought toward him. If we can fully merge our consciousness with the network, we might be able to activate its defensive capabilities. Is that even possible? He thought back, still amazed at how natural their mental communication had become. Theoretical, but yes. The ancient text spoke of harmonizers, paired individuals who could fully interface with the crystal consciousness. I think that's what's happening to us. It was a desperate gamble, but they had no alternatives. As Volkov and his team advanced cautiously into the chamber, Kalen and Lyra made a dash for the central column. Pulse fire erupted around them, scoring the crystal formations and sending energy discharges crackling across the chamber. Kalen returned fire, managing to hit one of the mercenaries and slow the other's advance. But a shot grazed his shoulder, spinning him around. Lyra caught him, pulling him the final meters to the central column. The moment they touched the massive crystal structure together, a surge of energy coursed through them both. Their resonance exploded into full synchronization, their individual consciousnesses remaining distinct but perfectly aligned, like instruments in a cosmic orchestra. The ancient consciousness of the crystal network enveloped them, confused at first by their presence after eons of dormancy. Through the resonance, Lyra conveyed understanding and urgency, while Kalen contributed tactical awareness of the immediate threat. Volkov, sensing something happening, rushed forward with a neural dampener. "Stop them," he commanded his team. But the crystal network was awakening rapidly now, energy pulsing through the chamber in waves of increasing intensity. The mercenaries' equipment began to malfunction, their weapons overloading with dangerous feedback. Volkov reached the central platform, activating the dampener, which emitted a high-pitched whine. The crystal network shuddered, its energy fluctuating wildly. Kalen, still physically present even as part of his consciousness merged with the network, launched himself at Volkov. They crashed to the ground, struggling for control of the dampener. Despite his injury, Kalen's combat training gave him an edge in the physical confrontation. Meanwhile, Lyra deepened her connection with the network, her scientific understanding helping to stabilize the ancient consciousness as it fought against the dampener's effects. Through their shared resonance, Kalen could feel her guiding the network, showing it how to adapt to the attack. With a mighty effort, Kalen wrenched the dampener from Volkov's grasp and smashed it against the crystal floor. The commander howled in rage, drawing a vibroblade from his armor and slashing at Kalen. The blade caught him across the chest, cutting deep. At that moment, Lyra and the network reached full synchronization. The central column blazed with light so intense it seemed to bend reality around it. A pulse of energy expanded outward, passing through Kalen harmlessly, but striking Volkov with devastating force. The commander was thrown backwards, his armor systems frying from the energy overload. Throughout the cavern, mercenaries dropped to their knees as their neural systems were temporarily overloaded by the energy wave. Their weapons and equipment sparked and died, rendered useless. The crystal network, fully awakened now, extended its awareness throughout its vast system spanning the entire moon. Ancient defense systems, dormant for millennia, began to power up, targeting the Omnicorp ships in orbit. Lyra helped Kalen to the central column, pressing his wounded hand against the crystal alongside hers. His blood smeared the crystalline surface, which seemed to absorb it, glowing brighter in response. "We need to complete the synchronization," she urged, her voice both physical and mental. "The network is defending itself, but it needs our guidance after so long a sleep." Together, they surrendered fully to the resonance, their consciousness expanding into the vast crystal mind. It was like falling into an ocean of light and memory, the accumulated knowledge and experience of a civilization that had flourished and eventually faded millions of years before humanity had even evolved. The ancient consciousness welcomed them, curious about these new beings yet instantly understanding their intentions through the resonance. It showed them glimpses of its creators, a species of energy matter symbiotes who had evolved in harmony with the crystal structures, eventually transcending physical form entirely. With Lyra and Kalen as its conduits, the network launched a coordinated defense against the Omnicorp presence. In orbit, the corporation's ships found their systems failing as targeted energy pulses disabled their weapons and propulsion. On the surface, Every Omnicorp operative was incapacitated as the crystal network generated precisely calibrated energy fields that disrupted their neural functions without causing permanent damage. In the chamber, Volkov struggled to his feet, his backup systems allowing him to resist some of the network's effects. Seeing Kalen and Lyra in their trance-like state, vulnerable as they communed with the network, he staggered toward them with murderous intent. But the network had anticipated this. Crystal formations nearest the central column suddenly elongated, forming a protective barrier around Kalen and Lyra. Other crystals grew with impossible speed, encasing Volkov in a crystalline prison that immobilized him while keeping him conscious. The full synchronization lasted perhaps minutes in physical time, but to Kalen and Lyra, it seemed like days or weeks as they helped the ancient consciousness reorient itself to the current galactic situation. They shared knowledge of current civilizations, technological capabilities, and political structures, while the network shared its vast repository of scientific and philosophical understanding. When they finally began to withdraw from the deep merge, returning more fully to their physical forms, they did so gradually, maintaining a connection to the network that felt like a background hum of awareness. The chamber had transformed around them. The crystals pulsed with renewed vigor, and new formations had grown throughout the space. The incapacitated mercenaries had been carefully encased in transport-ready crystal containers that would keep them immobilized but unharmed. Kalen looked down at his chest, surprised to find his wound healed, the torn fabric the only evidence it had existed. Lyra, too, seemed transformed. Her lavender skin now had a subtle luminescence, and her silver eyes contained facets like the crystals themselves. "We've been changed," she said softly. "The resonance is permanent now. We're harmonizers, interfaces between the crystal consciousness and the outside world." Through their connection, Kalen understood what this meant. The ancient civilization hadn't truly died out. It had evolved, its consciousness preserved in the crystal network, waiting for compatible beings to reawaken it. They had become its ambassadors, forever linked to it and to each other. "What now?" he asked, looking at the defeated Omnicorp forces. Lyra smiled, a plan already forming in her mind that he could perceive through their connection. "Now we tell the truth." Using the network's vast communications capabilities, they broadcast a message to the Galactic Council, the Xylosian Science Academy, and major news networks throughout settled space. The message contained irrefutable evidence of Omnicorp's illegal activities, along with preliminary data about the crystal network and its potential for revolutionary clean energy production. They didn't reveal everything. Some secrets of the ancient consciousness were too profound or dangerous for immediate release, but they shared enough to ensure protection for the moon and its crystal network under interstellar preservation laws. Within days, Council peacekeeping forces arrived, taking custody of Volkov and his mercenaries. Omnicorp's stock collapsed as the scandal broke, triggering investigations into decades of corporate malfeasance across multiple systems. The corporation that had once seemed untouchable began to crumble under the weight of its exposed crimes. Scientists and diplomats from dozens of worlds came to study the crystal network under Lyra's careful guidance, while Kalen, with a security background, helped establish protocols to protect the ancient consciousness from exploitation or harm. Together, they became the network's guardians and interpreters, their unique resonance allowing them to communicate its needs and intentions to the wider galactic community. The technology derived from studying the crystal network revolutionized energy production throughout settled space, eliminating the resource conflicts that had plagued interstellar relations for centuries. Standing at the entrance to the heart chamber months later, Kalen and Lyra watched the sunset paint the barren landscape in hues of amber and violet. The magnetic storms still raged across the moon's surface, but now they understood them as expressions of the network's ongoing processes, beautiful and dangerous, but essential to its existence. "Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up when you offered to share your sleeping bag with me that first night?" Kalen asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Lyra's silvery laugh echoed through their shared consciousness. I believe it was a stasis cocoon, not a sleeping bag, she corrected with mock seriousness, the humor clear in their resonance. And no, I had no idea our survival strategy would lead to this. She gestured at the vastness of the crystal network surrounding them, its consciousness a warm presence in both their minds. Their relationship had evolved into something unprecedented, neither fully human nor Xylosian, but something entirely new. Their bodies remained physically separate beings, but their minds existed in a constant harmony that transcended conventional understanding of companionship or love. The ancients called it dual consciousness, Lyra said, responding to his unspoken thoughts. Two separate entities that form a third shared awareness without losing their individuality. They considered it the highest form of connection. The crystal network hummed in agreement, its ancient wisdom flowing through their shared consciousness like a gentle river. It had shown them memories of its creators, how they had eventually evolved beyond physical form entirely, their consciousness merging with the network as their bodies failed. But they had left this legacy, hoping that someday others would come who could understand and continue their work. I'm still getting used to never being alone in my head, Kalen admitted, though I can't imagine going back to the silence now. Lyra took his hand, her lavender fingers intertwining with his. Physical touch was no longer necessary for their connection, but it remained a pleasant affirmation of their shared journey. The council wants us to testify at the Omnicorp tribunal next month, she said. Volkov's trial is expected to reveal corruption extending to the highest levels of several planetary governments. Kayla nodded. The aftermath of their discovery had sent shockwaves through galactic society. The revelation that a corporation had attempted to weaponize a sentient ancient consciousness had sparked fierce ethical debates and led to new legislation protecting similar discoveries across the galaxy. And your people? The Science Academy? He asked. They're struggling to categorize what we've become. Lyra smiled. Xylosian culture has extensive protocols for almost everything, but nothing that covers spontaneous cross-species consciousness resonance. They're simultaneously fascinated and scandalized. Through their connection, Kaylin felt her amusement at her people's consternation. Lyra had always been something of an outlier among the typically reserved Xylosians, perhaps why she had been receptive to the resonance in the first place. My parents want to meet you, she added, a hint of nervousness coloring the thought. Meeting the parents, Kaylin laughed. Some things are universal, apparently. The crystal network suddenly pulsed with activity, drawing their attention. Through their shared consciousness, they perceived distant ships entering the system. Not Omnicorp this time, but scientific vessels from the newly established Interspecies Research Cooperative. They're early, Lyra observed, checking the actual time against their expected arrival. Eager scientists? Kaylin suggested. Or more trouble? The network spread its awareness outward, scanning the approaching vessels with technology far beyond current galactic standards. It determined they were indeed the expected research expedition. Humans, Xylosians, and representatives from 3 other species working together to learn from the ancient consciousness. No trouble, Lyra confirmed. Just the next chapter beginning. They turned back toward the heart chamber, ready to welcome the newcomers and continue their role as bridges between worlds. The network hummed contentedly around them, its consciousness expanding and evolving daily through its interaction with them and the wider galaxy. Kaylin paused at the threshold, looking back at the harsh landscape where they had crash-landed, fought for survival, and ultimately found a destiny neither could have imagined. From survival to symbiosis, he murmured, the philosophical observation uncharacteristic of the man he had once been. Lyra smiled, completing his thought through their resonance. From strangers to something there isn't even a word for yet. The crystal network pulsed in agreement, adding its own perspective to their shared consciousness. A perspective that spanned millions of years and saw their unlikely meeting as part of a cosmic pattern that had always been moving toward this moment of connection. As they descended back into the heart chamber, the central column glowed in welcome, its light reflecting off their faces, one human, one Xylosian, both forever changed by an offer to share warmth on a frozen night. The resonance between them deepened as they prepared to face whatever came next, not as separate beings, but as a harmony of three consciousnesses that had found each other across the vastness of space and time, creating something entirely new and full of boundless possibility. What had begun as a desperate survival strategy, a human and an alien sharing a high-tech sleeping bag, had evolved into a connection that would reshape galactic understanding of consciousness itself. Their journey had only just begun, but whatever paths lay ahead, they would walk them together, their shared resonance a beacon of possibility in an ever-expanding universe.